Okay. So, hope everybody's been enjoying the Lone Star Tea Festival. My name is Jason Ellis. I'm one of the co-founders of Lost Pines Yaupon Tea. I've been experimenting, playing around with Yaupon, trying to make it different ways, and learning about it for about 10 years now. I'm a big plant nerd, much more than a public speaker. Into foraging and stuff like that, and that's how I first discovered Yaupon. I was looking for useful native plants of Texas, and I figured a good way to try to figure out what would be useful around here would be to look into what the Native Americans did. And that's how I learned about Yaupon. They used Yaupon to brew a stimulating drink. I found out that it was caffeinated, which really piqued my interest. And in addition to caffeine, it also has a related stimulant to caffeine because there's xanthine alkaloid. It's called theobromine, and it's the
chocolate.
It's the chocolate thing. Yep, it's the pleasure molecule, the thing in cacao that's supposed to make you feel good. So yeah, I started playing around with that, and I learned that what they would do is they would take the leaves and the small twigs, and they would roast them. And the way they roasted them varied from tribe to tribe. They would roast them until they were really dark, and then they would brew them into tea. They traded Yaupon all over the Southwest. It was drank traditionally in a whelk shell, which is a type of sea animal, you know, like a shell like that. And there's, if you look online, there's all kinds of really beautifully, ornately decorated whelk shells that they have found all over the United States, way far away from from areas where Yaupon even grows. They found pottery out in Arizona. Just recently there was an NPR article about it. They found traces of Yaupon because of its caffeine to theobromine ratio they found in these cups. They realized that this was Yaupon. It wasn't some other kind of caffeinated beverage. And what's interesting is they also found cacao there in Arizona, which is really strange because it comes from, you know, way south. And so the Yaupon actually grows from Houston is about as far west as it grows. It'll go a little further west than Houston, and then up as far as Bastrop, where we actually harvest our Yaupon from. And then it goes all the way along the coast to Florida, and then as far north as Virginia, and all within about 150 miles of the coastline for the most part. And there's one isolated other place where Yaupon grows, and that's in a place in Central America. And it's just like one little spot on the map. And my theory is that when they were trading cacao up to you know, Arizona and stuff like that, they've tried Yaupon, and they took some Yaupon plants back down there, and I figured that's the way it probably ended up there. The Yaupon, the name Yaupon comes from a Catawba word, which in it means little tree. And the Cherokees called Yaupon the beloved tree. So when the Spaniards arrived here, they introduced, the Native Americans introduced Yaupon to the Spaniards. And back in 1615, there was a priest, Father Jimenez. He was quoted as saying, "There is no Spaniard or Indian who does not drink it every day in the morning and the evening. It is more of a vice than chocolate in New Spain. And any day that a Spaniard does not drink it, he feels that he is going to die." So back to 1615, they were drinking Yaupon. And then after that, the English were drinking it here, the French, the Spanish, and they were even exporting it back to Europe. In France, it was called Appalachian. In Spain, it was called Chocolat del Indio. And in England, they called it South Sea tea. So at some point, people stopped drinking Yaupon because nobody knows what it is nowadays. And the reason people stopped drinking it, can't really find out exactly what the definitive reason there was. Some people say it was because of the Boston Tea Party. Even though it wasn't an imported tea, still they called it a tea here, which it's technically not, because it's not the Camilla sinensis, but tea really fell out of favor after the American Revolution. So that could have been part of it. And then there's one of my favorite reasons, or there's a conspiracy theory around the people not drinking Yaupon anymore. So the King of England had a botanist named William Yaupon, and he's the one that gave Yaupon its scientific name, and he named it Ilex vomitoria. The Native Americans used Yaupon in a purification ceremony. They would fast for days on end, and then they would brew Yaupon very, very, very strong. Like they would roast it really dark, put a bunch of leaves in there, and then brew it and brew it and brew it until they just brewed it down and it was black. And they called it black drink. And it was a ceremonial drink, and the actual recipe varies from tribe to tribe, and no one knows exactly what the recipe was of any of them. The one thing that they know that was in there was Yaupon, but they also put other herbs and stuff in there. So after they brewed this really, really strong drink, and they fasted for days on end, they would drink it and drink it and drink it and drink it, and just keep on drinking it till they just vomited because they couldn't drink it anymore. And the more you could take in before you threw up, the more purified you become. And modern science has shown that there's no emetic properties in Yaupon. There's nothing in there that makes you throw up. But so William Yaupon, he was the botanist for the King of England. Some people say that he was in the secret employ of the East India Tea Company at the time. And so Yaupon was being exported to Europe and cutting into tea trade there, and they didn't like that. So they gave it a nasty name, and then it kind of fell out of favor. That's one of the theories behind it. I kind of like that one. So during the Civil War, there was actually a resurgence in the drinking of Yaupon because of all the naval blockades, and people couldn't get coffee and tea, and people started going back to drinking Yaupon. But then after the Civil War, it kind of went away again. Some people say because it grows everywhere. It grows everywhere, and it was considered something for poor people. So, they wanted a more status thing, like tea, especially something like iced tea, was a really high status drink. Being able to get tea leaves from, way far away, ice, was a really expensive thing. So if you could make iced tea, that was, pretty impressive thing. So recently, there's been a kind of resurgence in Yaupon. About 4 or 5 years ago, there were no Yaupon companies in the United States, and now there are 5 of them. There's 3 here in Texas, there's 1 in Florida, and there's 1 in Georgia. And that started 3 or 4 years ago. NPR has done a recent article on Yaupon. There's been a Texas Monthly article about Yaupon now. It's been in the Austin Chronicle and the Austin American Statesman in Austin. They've started studying some health benefits of Yaupon. A&M recently did a study on the anti-inflammatory properties of Yaupon, where they were studying it specifically in regards to colon cancer, and they found that it actually had some promise in the reduction of getting colon cancer. Not like curing it, but keeping it kind of at bay. They've done some studies at the University of Florida for its antioxidant levels, and apparently has antioxidant levels up there with green tea and blueberries and stuff. And different cultivars of Yaupon have different levels of antioxidants. So now they need to figure out which plants are the best ones, and then clone those, and then they can try to make really medicinal tea out of a Native American plant, which would be pretty cool. So where we harvest Yaupon out in Bastrop, it's considered a nuisance plant by a lot of people. It's considered a nuisance plant by a lot of ranchers. Overgrazing in a lot of places has gotten rid of the natural grasses and forbs, so Yaupon just starts sprouting up everywhere, creates a thicket, and then their cattle can't graze there anymore. And then if you don't come and you don't chop the Yaupon away, then you have a massive fire hazard. So I'm not sure, most damaging wildfire in Texas history, and it was the 6th most damaging wildfire in U.S. history. Burnt almost 5,000 acres of land. Hundreds and hundreds of people lost their homes. It was awful. And now the Yaupon is actually growing back faster than the pine forest out there. It's threatening to change that whole area into a post-oak Yaupon thicket. The pine forest out there is pretty unique. Like around here, there's pines everywhere. The Lost Pines Forest is the westernmost stand of loblolly pines in the entire nation, separated by the rest of the pines of East Texas by about 100 miles. So that whole area is like under threat of just being turned into a post-oak Yaupon thicket. So going out there and removing Yaupon, making tea out of it, actually helps restore the forest, and in turn it also helps out this creature called the Houston toad, which is the first toad, or the first amphibian ever added to the federal endangered species list. And they have one of their last major breeding grounds is out there, and there's a lady whose property that we're working on right now. She's getting a wildlife tax exemption for removing Yaupon and cedar to make room for the native grasses and forbs that the Houston toad really needs to survive. It's its natural habitat up there. So yeah, this is really, I think, it could be the beginning of complete like a renaissance for Yaupon right now. And just as is with green teas, like all the varieties of tea that are out here today, they all come mostly from the exact same plant, all the Camellia sinensis. And from black tea to green tea to white tea, oolong, it's all in the preparation of the harvesting, what they do with it, how they process it afterwards. And I really think that could happen with Yaupon also. There's so many different ways that you can make Camellia sinensis. I'm sure you can have a huge wide range of flavors with Yaupon as well. Yes?
Well, does it have a little bit of a chocolate flavor?
No, it doesn't. It doesn't have a chocolate flavor. If you roast it dark, it has kind of a roasty flavor. If you roast it where the leaves are just kind of green, it has like a sweet, almost silky flavor. If you were to take some Yaupon and steep it, and if you shake it up a lot, it'll actually foam a whole bunch. And I think that foam gives it it has like the silkiness to it, and I think it's because it foams a whole bunch.
Are there any of these booths out here that are sampling it? I mean, you all were, but I guess I missed.
We're actually still out there. My girlfriend's out there sampling still. There's a big circle with a green toad, or a green circle with a white toad. But yeah, it's a huge toad. It's a big banner up there.
Okay.
It looks like
banner says.
It says Lost Pines Yaupon tea. It looks like this guy right here.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Trying to think about what else I can say. There's not a lot of research that's been done on it since it's so new. But do y'all have any questions? Or?
I do.
Okay.
Do y'all have any like seasons that y'all pick, or is it just all year long that you can go out and pick the leaves?
It's an evergreen, so we actually go out there all year long. We really prefer the winter because it's really hot in Austin. So.
You and I were talking briefly yesterday about how it's actually a holly plant.
Mm-hmm.
Are there other members of the holly family that are also have caffeine?
There are 3 known caffeinated hollies. So Yaupon is the only North American one. There's Guayusa, which comes from, I think it's Ecuador. It's a South American plant. And then yerba mate, which is from Argentina mostly.
Oh, I know that. That's a relative of this.
It's a member of the holly family.
Yeah, they're all like the Ilex genus plants. So there's 3 known caffeinated versions. I think, you know what? I read recently there's another actually plant, another Ilex and another holly in the United States called Dahu holly. It's Ilex cassine. And it has apparently a little bit of caffeine in it as well, but it's not at a level where it's appreciable really. Caffeine is actually created by the plant as an insect repellent. Insects don't like caffeine, they don't like eating it. So that's why in traditional teas like green teas and stuff, a lot of times they pick Chinese teas or Asian teas, they pick the last few leaves, the newest leaves.
Yeah.
They pick the newest leaves.
1 inch down or something like that.
Yeah, depending on the
I went to
the
one
thing.
of the other tops.
Yeah.
They just pick the tops.
Yeah, just the tops.
Because that's the area that'll have the insect repellent.
That's right. Yeah, they have to protect the young fresh leaves so that they put its
Well,
energy into
are the
there.
lower leaves ever used for anything, or are they just wasted?
With Camellia sinensis, I'm not sure. We use leaves from the entire plant. We use leaves from the entire
But the
plant.
ones from the top will have more caffeine.
More caffeine, they will.
Okay.
Where could you buy one of those bushes, I guess?
A Yaupon bush?
Yeah.
Home Depot.
Home Depot?
Yep.
It's a common nursery plant.
Yep. If
Do
you
they
go
have
out
any
here,
flowers? Anything pretty?
no, they
Probably
make
not.
little tiny white flowers. And then the females have the red berries. In the wintertime, they're really pretty. But the red berries are toxic. You don't want anything to do with them.
Are the leaves kind of sticky like holly? They have.
No, they don't have thorns at all. No
Okay.
thorns. But yeah, in the nursery business, they actually have a bunch of different varieties. They have we actually have one out here called a nana, and it's a dwarf holly, and it's about this big, and they won't ever get any bigger than this. And they sculpt them into little round balls.
Have you tried any different cultivars or anything like that?
We have not, because we just get it all from the wild. All the cultivars in the nursery trade are they find like so. There's one called weeping holly, and it weeping yaupon. The main trunk grows straight up, and then all the other branches they grow out and down. It's kind of a really weird looking plant because all the branches are going down. So that somebody went out there and they're like, oh, this is a really strange looking plant. So they take a cutting from it and then they just clone that. You know, they grow from that and they clone it, clone it, clone it, clone it. So all the ones in the nursery trade are all just copies of each other, basically. But the weeping yaupon apparently has the most caffeine that they've tested. They've only tested, I mean, the cultivars they've tested. The weeping yaupon has the most. But we don't use anything from the nursery or urban. We're not doing urban foraging. Who knows what people have sprayed anywhere? You go out in the wild and find these pristine plants.
But not all of the relatives, I guess, have the theobromine, though. Or do they?
All yaupon will have theobromine. Yeah.
Is there more in certain varieties?
I bet there is. I've never read anything to that effect though, as which ones have more. They need to do a lot of research on it still. Anybody have any other questions?
Well, just, I want to clarify one thing.
Okay, sure.
You said that this lady was getting a tax break or something for
Mhm.
clearing all the Yaupon off her
Mhm.
property?
Mm-hmm.
Because that would allow other things to grow? or-
That's right. Yeah, she's getting a wildlife property tax exemption to.
Wildlife property tax exemption?
Yep. Specifically for the Houston toad, because her property is in the range where the last major breeding ground for the Houston toad is. And without getting rid of the yaupon.
This toad.
That's a cartoon character version of the toad. It looks similar.
Well, are these toads used for anything?
Not that I know of.
Well, frog legs are considered kind of delicacies. I don't know. but-
Yeah, no, these guys are pretty small. Pretty small. I don't know if you can get much of the meat off their legs.
What do they want it for then?
Just to keep the natural, the natural
They're a
balance.
natural
in there.
predator that eats something that we don't want, I guess.
They probably eat a lot of bugs.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, we gotta keep things in balance, I guess.
I think that's what they're going after. Yeah. That's about all I have.
Well, it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I like talking about it. There's probably some other stuff I can't think of.
You'll remember as soon as we walk out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably will. Let me look at this notepad again.
So you said more research needs to be done. Are you gonna partner with a university or a scientist somewhere to do whatever?
I would love to do something like that. That would be really, really
Do
cool.
you have any plans in that direction?
Nothing in the works. Right now, we're just trying to get our company going and everything
Yeah.
like that. But yeah, that would actually be like experimenting with things and like learning stuff. So that would be pretty sweet, actually. Yes, sir.
How do you process the leaves?
We remove the leaves and the small twigs from the branches, and kind of a secret how we do that. And then we dry them, and then we roast them. And then roasting is kind of like, it depends on how much moisture is in the leaves, and when we're drying them, it depends on how much moisture is in the air. So dry them till they seem about dry the way they need to be, which is a few days. But that really depends on the humidity. And then when we finally roast them, there's still moisture left in them anyways. And a lot of times it's kind of by sense of smell. We'll load up the oven and we'll set the timer for about how long we think it's going to take. And then at some point, like, that smells about right, we need to check on it. And we'll pull them out and we'll look at them and it's like, yeah, that's the right color. And so and then if it's not, put them back in and let them go for longer. With the light roast, we make a light and a dark roast, and the difference there is just the temperature and how long we let it go. We've tried making, like I was reading about matcha. I think matcha is pretty cool. I don't know if y'all are familiar with it,
Yeah.
probably. So I decided, like, I wonder if I can make like a Yaupon matcha.
Yeah.
Except for that, I started reading like the way they actually make matchas. They cover the plants and they leave them like that for X amount of days or weeks, and then it makes the chlorophyll go really high because they're not getting enough sun. And then they take them off, and then they devein the leaves, and then they grind them up. And that's not something that we can really do at this point. But I have tried taking just the leaves and drying them, and then just like grinding them like in a blender until they get powdered, super powdered. And it actually tastes pretty good, but it doesn't completely dissolve like matcha. I think because we don't get the stems, the veins out. But it's almost like an instant tea, but not like a chemical instant tea. You still end up with a little sludge on the bottom,
Yeah.
but it's acceptable. Okay. Depending on the person, it still tastes good. You just don't drink it all the way to the bottom.
For the matcha, they were saying in the grinding process, you have to be real careful and do it slow because it generates heat. And then that heat breaks down some of the chemical components.
Yeah, when I was trying to make a matcha version of Yaupon, my blender almost died. I kept having to turn it off. I mean, it took a really long time to get it like to a powder. You get a Vitamix, get a better blender.
My question was basically about the heat. Do you have to get the Yaupon to water to a certain temperature to draw the caffeine or any other the beneficial?
I've read that caffeine extracts best in like near boiling water. Like the hotter the water, the better you get for caffeine extraction. We cold brew it sometimes, and honestly, I can't tell if there's a difference in the amount of caffeine that comes out of it or not. I'm not sure. I guess is the answer. Yeah. Cool. Yeah. You're welcome. Thank y'all.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is my first talk I've ever given. Thank you very much, y'all.
What if you ground it by hand?
Yeah, they stone grind it, I think. And I think you could do, but
Because it's your blender's gonna generate heat, not heat that we can detect, but it's gonna generate heat in the
inside,
leaf.
yeah. I bet it does. But stone grinding it would create friction too, the same way.
And they have a special way of grinding it, which I have no idea, but that stood out in my mind when you mentioned that you were grinding it. Because they said it really have to grind it a certain way, otherwise it ruins the flavor.
Huh. Yeah, I have no idea. I know that the container I had it in was getting warm.
Oh, it was?
The base of the blender was like I had to turn it off because it smelled like it was starting to like get burny in there.
Oh, yeah.
But I mean, even the container when it was getting warm, it wasn't it wasn't nearly as warm as